Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. It's fascinating, the questions we get from y'all, and today we're going to tackle one that's been on humanity's mind for centuries. What is justice? And you asked us to dive into this with Jean Jacques Rousseau. I got to say, I'm pretty excited to see where this takes us.
Well, Rousseau is a perfect fit for this. His ideas are complex, even controversial sometimes, but they really get right to the core of what it means for us to live in a society and, try to strive for some kind of fairness.
Yeah, for sure. So to get started, let's talk about this social contract. I feel like I hear that phrase all the time, but honestly, it's kind of always felt a little abstract to me. What's the deal with that?
Well, it's an idea that's been around for centuries, but Rousseau really brought it, front and center. Imagine, early humans just living in this state of nature. Total freedom, right? But constant risk. So to get some security, to cooperate, they decide to give up a bit of that freedom and enter into a contract with each other. That's a social contract.
Okay, so it's like a trade-off, right? Freedom for security. But how does that connect to justice?
That's where things get really interesting. Rousseau basically says that justice itself, comes out of this agreement. It's not some kind of, abstract thing up in the clouds. It's grounded in that moment when society is formed. It's about balance. What people give up and what they get in return, that's like the foundation of a just society. When that balance is broken, when things get out of whack, that's when injustice pops up.
I see. Okay, that's starting to click a little bit for me. But wouldn't this contract, this agreement, look different in different societies?
Absolutely. Think about it. A small rural town is going to have a way different idea of the social contract than some massive city, right? And this is what keeps Rousseau relevant even today. We're always wrestling with this. Individual rights versus what we owe to everyone else, especially now when the world feels so connected.
Yeah, it's true. Makes you wonder if we're always kind of renegotiating this social contract as things change, without even realizing it.
Oh, Rousseau would probably say we are. And that's where the general will comes in. This idea that there's a collective desire for what's good for everyone, not just what individuals want.
So we all kind of agree on what's best for the community as a whole.
Yeah.
Even if we don't always say it out loud.
Right. And this can get tricky because sometimes what's good for the group clashes with what one person wants, right? Think of something like those vaccine mandates. Some people push back hard, but if it protects everyone's health, well, that could be seen as serving the general will.
Yeah. Makes you think about all the debates we have these days. Healthcare, climate change, all that. Are we struggling to figure out this general will? On those big issues?
Ooh, that's a good point. Rousseau said that figuring out the general will, that's one of the biggest challenges for any society, especially as it gets bigger and more diverse. But he felt it was crucial for justice, making sure the needs of everyone aren't ignored for just a few people's desires.
Okay, I'm following so far. We've got this social contract, this balancing act between individual freedom and what's good for everyone. And we've got the general will, that idea of working towards the benefit of everyone. But where does government fit into all this? Because Rousseau talks about different types of government, right?
Yeah.
And how they impact justice.
Oh, yeah, he does. He lays out three main forms: democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy. And he really dives deep into how each one can either help or hurt justice. He points out that democracies, even though they seem ideal, they can turn into mob rule if individual rights aren't protected.
So it's not as easy as saying democracy, that's always the most just system.
Nope, not at all. He believed that the best government depends on the specifics of the society, its size, culture, what the people are like. Even a monarchy, he suggests, could be just if the ruler's wise and truly cares about the people.
Huh. That's pretty surprising. It's not like he's pushing us to look past the labels and see how power is used no matter what the government's called. But I gotta ask, for Rousseau, what was the most important part of a just system?
For Rousseau, the cornerstone was sovereignty. He was adamant about this. The people can't just give up their right to govern themselves.
So even in a monarchy, the ruler's power should come from the people. They have to agree to be ruled.
Exactly. He believed that when people give up that right, that's when injustice starts to take root. And this leads us to one of the most, I think, fascinating and maybe controversial parts of Rousseau's ideas, what he thought about arts and sciences.
Okay, now this is where I get a little lost. Isn't knowledge and progress usually seen as a good thing? How could that be bad for justice?
See, Rousseau wasn't against knowledge itself. He was more worried about how arts and sciences could distract us from what's truly important. being good citizens and caring for the common good.
Wait, hold on a sec. Can you give me an example? How could something like art or science actually harm society?
Well, he saw throughout history times when societies got super advanced with art, science, tech, you name it. But at the same time, they became more unequal, more corrupt, less concerned about everybody's well-being.
Ah, so it's like progress without a moral compass. Advancement that only helps a few people and leaves everyone else behind.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why Rousseau really pushed for civic virtue. This idea that citizens need education, yeah, but they also need morality, compassion, a sense of responsibility for their community.
Whoa, this is really making me rethink some things. It's like Rousseau saying, okay, progress is cool and all, but are we using it to create a just society? Or are we just creating new ways to be unfair and divided?
That's a great way to frame it. And it leads us to what I think is one of the biggest questions Rousseau asks. What does a truly just society look like in action? And how do we even get there?
Those are some big questions. Sounds like something for our next dive into Rousseau's thinking. But for now, let's take a minute for you, our listeners, to think about what we've covered. Think about what you've experienced, what you see in the world. Where do you see the social contract playing out? Can you find examples of that general will? Or times when what individuals want clashes with what's good for everyone? We'll be back in a bit to keep unpacking these ideas. They're complex, they're fascinating, there's a lot more to explore.
And we're back. So we've been talking about Rousseau and his idea of justice, right? It's all rooted in this social contract thing and trying to figure out what's good for everyone, the general will. But remember that point about arts and sciences? It's almost like a paradox. Can progress, actually work against a just society?
Yeah, it's definitely got me thinking. Usually we see progress as a good thing. More knowledge, new technology, that should all lead to a better world, right?
It can, for sure. But Rousseau was really aware of, the potential downsides. He uses this metaphor. It's about a well. He says the truth is at the bottom. Are we supposed to just spend our lives on the edge looking in, lost in thought? What about all the real problems we got to deal with right now?
I see what you mean. So it's not knowledge itself that's bad, it's how we use it. Or maybe getting so caught up in learning that we forget about building a fair and just society.
That's it. Think back to when Rousseau was writing The Enlightenment. Everyone was celebrating reason and science, but he saw a potential dark side. What if this focus on individual achievement, everyone trying to be the smartest, what if it comes at the cost of caring about each other and the community?
It's like he's saying, hey, slow down. All this progress, it might not be making us better people. We could end up with incredible tech, but living in a world that's totally unfair and unequal.
That's exactly right. He saw this potential for things to go bad, especially when knowledge is all about ego and status, not about making life better for everyone.
Okay, this makes me think about debates around technology today, like artificial intelligence, how social media algorithms work. Are these tools building a more just world? Or are they just making existing problems worse?
Those are the questions Rousseau would be asking. He was worried about societies that focused on being clever instead of being good, He saw how art and science could be used to manipulate, to trick people, to help those in power while ignoring those who are vulnerable.
So how do we avoid that? How do we make sure progress is actually working for justice?
Rousseau believed that being a good citizen is key. It's not enough to just be smart. We got to be good people too. We need education, yeah, but we also need morals, compassion, and a sense of responsibility for our community.
Sounds like he's calling for a whole different kind of education. One that focuses on character, not just intelligence.
Absolutely. He thought a truly just society needs people who are not only informed, but also virtuous, engaged, people who care about the common good. And this kind of brings us back to the role of government in all this. Rousseau had some strong opinions about that, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He wasn't just theorizing. He was involved in the politics of his day. So let's get into his thoughts on government. What did he see as the essential parts of a just political system?
Well, the big one for him was the sovereignty of the people. Remember that social contract we talked about? That means the government gets its power from the people's consent. No kings ruling just because they're born into it. No rule by force. The people are in charge.
This sounds a lot like, the basis of modern democracy.
It is. Rousseau's ideas were hugely influential in shaping how we think about democracy. But he went further than just voting and representatives. He also talked about how important it is for citizens to be active, to participate.
So it's not enough to just vote every few years and then call it a day?
Nope, not for Rousseau. He imagined a society where people were actively involved in public life, debating, expressing their opinions, holding their leaders accountable. Justice wasn't something you just watched. You had to be a part of it.
That ties back to what you said earlier about education, developing good citizens, people who care. It sounds like Rousseau saw civic engagement as like a crucial part of that.
Exactly. It's through participating that we learn about justice, about what our community needs, and how to work together for the common good. But Rousseau also knew that systems and structures matter. He didn't think a just society could just rely on people being nice. He believed in clear laws, applied fairly and equally to everyone.
That seems pretty straightforward, right?
It is, but it's essential. When laws are random, when they favor certain people, or when they aren't enforced consistently, it breaks down trust. That's when injustice can really take hold.
Yeah, it makes people feel like the system is rigged, that justice is only for the privileged few.
You got it. To prevent that, Rousseau argued for a separation of powers, checks, and balances in the government. No one person or group gets too much power. He didn't trust concentrated power. He thought it always leads to corruption and people taking advantage.
Now that sounds familiar. It's like the structure of a lot of democracies today. Different branches of government, each with their own role.
Exactly. He saw this kind of structure as key to protecting individual freedoms and preventing tyranny. But even with the best laws, the best systems, Rousseau believed a truly just society needs something more. A shared commitment to the common good, a spirit of, doing the right thing that goes beyond just following the rules.
So it's not enough to just have a good system. The people in that system have to actually live those values of justice.
That's it. He believed a just society is one where people are driven to act justly, to care for each other, to contribute to the well-being of everyone. And this brings us right back to that point about progress, that paradox. Rousseau was worried about a world obsessed with wealth, technology, and individual success, a world that forgets about basic moral principles.
It's like he's saying, sure, we can have all the fancy stuff, but if people aren't treated fairly, if everyone doesn't have a chance to thrive, what's the point?
That's a great way to put it. It highlights this tension that Rousseau was always grappling with. Progress versus virtue, ambition versus the common good. He didn't have easy answers, but he made us think hard about what really matters, what kind of world we want to live in, and what role we each play in building a more just world.
This has been really eye-opening. We started with the simple question, what is justice? And now we're exploring all these complex ideas. Freedom, responsibility, government, progress, being good citizens.
It's a lot to take in, and Rousseau loved tackling these big questions. In fact, there's one more piece of his thinking that's super important to understand in his idea of justice.
Lay it on me. What else did Rousseau have to say?
Well, he was deeply concerned with inequality. For Rousseau, justice and inequality are like oil and water. They just don't mix. He saw inequality as a huge roadblock to a truly just society. He thought that massive differences in wealth, power, and opportunity, they wreck the social contract, create divisions that stop us from achieving what's good for everyone.
So it's not just about being nice to each other. It's about tackling the big systemic stuff that creates and keeps inequality going.
You got it. Rousseau argued that we can't have real justice if some people are always at a disadvantage, if they can't get basic necessities, if the rules are rigged to favor the privileged.
This makes me think about all the different types of inequality in the world today. Economic, racial, gender. I bet Rousseau would have a lot to say about all that. But before we get into that, let's give you, our listener, a minute to think. Reflect on what we've talked about so far. Look at your own life and the world around you. Where do you see these ideas of justice and inequality playing out? What do you think Rousseau's ideas can offer as we try to deal with these challenges? We'll be back in a jiffy to continue exploring this.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been really digging into Rousseau's ideas about justice, how to get there, how it's all tied up with individual freedom, what we owe to each other, and even how progress can sometimes, trip us up. Last we left off, we were talking about how much Rousseau was concerned with inequality and how it messes up a just society.
Yeah, it's crazy how much his worries from way back then still resonate today. It feels like every day there's more news about the gap between rich and poor, social injustice, and all these systems that seem biased against certain groups. It's like a straight line from Rousseau's time to now,
Absolutely. Rousseau believed that when inequality runs wild, it basically breaks that social contract we talked about. When the difference between the haves and the have-nots gets too big, it breeds resentment, people don't trust each other, and things become unstable. He was adamant that you can't have a truly just society if some folks are systematically blocked from living a good life.
So what was his solution? Did he think we should all just share everything equally, like some kind of hippie commune?
Nah, not exactly. Rousseau was practical. He knew some level of inequality is gonna happen. People have different talents, different ambitions, right? But he was firm that extreme inequality is a problem that needs fixing. We gotta use policies and really focus on what's good for everyone to tackle that.
I see. So it's not about erasing all differences, but making sure everybody gets a fair shot.
Right on. Rousseau believed in creating a system where everyone, no matter their background, has the chance to live up to their potential. And education. That was huge for him. Everyone, regardless of their social standing, should have access to good quality education.
So breaking down those barriers that trap people in poverty. Making sure success is about hard work and talent, not just being born lucky.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about access to education either. He also believed in progressive taxation. The wealthier folks contribute more to fund public services that help everybody.
Makes sense. Using resources together to ensure things like healthcare, infrastructure, a decent standard of living for everyone.
Exactly. Leveling the playing field a bit, ensuring everyone benefits from progress, not just a select few. But Rousseau wasn't all about big systems and policies either. He recognized individual responsibility matters too. A truly just society needs citizens who are informed, engaged, care about the common good, and are willing to hold their leaders accountable.
That's that civic virtue thing again, right? Taking responsibility for making a just society. It's more than laws. It's about the values we live by and what we do.
You got it. Rousseau believed justice can't be forced from the top down. It has to grow from within. It takes people participating, challenging injustice, and working together for the common good.
It's a powerful vision. Inspiring, but also kind of daunting. Creating a just society feels like a huge task. Where do we even start?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I think Rousseau would say it starts with each of us. Our choices, our actions, look at our own biases, speak up against unfair systems, use our voices for change, understand that we're all connected and that building a just world helps everyone.
This deep dive into Rousseau has been amazing. He really makes you think differently about what justice is, how it's woven into our society, and what each of us can do to make a difference.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a pleasure exploring all this with you. And to our listeners, we hope this has sparked some new ideas, maybe even a bit of hope. The pursuit of justice is a long road, but it's a road worth traveling. Rousseau reminds us that it's through working together, caring about the common good, and believing in a better world that we can actually make things better. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep striving for that just world. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.